Good morning. The gallery's louder than the floor today. The hour of convening has arrived, and the Senate will now come to order. At this time, I'd like to ask all unauthorized persons to exit the chamber. And for the 15th legislative day, it is my honor to recognize the distinguished senator from the 53rd District.
Mr. President, it's a glorious day at our state capitol. Under your leadership, we're going to be working hard for the people of Georgia. A couple of things to make note. According to the senator from the 28th, today is National Muffin Day, one of his favorite days. And that's about all on all that, actually. But the journal's been read and found to be correct, Mr. President.
Thank you so much for that. Is there objection to dispensing with the reading of the journal? The chair hears none, and the reading of the journal is dispensed with. Is there objection to the confirmation of the journal? The chair hears none, and the journals are confirmed. All senators who have bills and resolutions, please bring them up to the secretary's desk. Mr. Secretary, first reading of Senate bills and resolutions, please.
Senate Bill 391 by Senator Kirkpatrick of the 32nd and others. A bill to be titled an act to amend Article 1 of Chapter 24 of Title 33 of the OCGA relating to general provisions regarding insurance. Shows to require health insurance.
Health and Human Services.
Senate Bill 392 by Senator Robertson of the 29th and others. A bill to be titled an act to amend Chapter 8 of Title 35 of the Official Code of Georgia Annotated relating to employment and training of peace officers. So as to enact a Bill of Rights.
Public Safety.
Senate Bill 393 by Senator Strickland of the 17th and others. A bill to be titled an act to amend Part 2 of Article 2 of Chapter 3 of Title 20 and Chapter 3 of Title 35 of the OCGA relating to the university system and the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, respectively, so as to revise the duties.
Public Safety.
Senate Bill 394 by Senator Albers of the 56th and others. A bill to be titled an act to amend Article 3 of Chapter 5 of Title 16, Article 1 of Chapter 15 of Title 45, and Article 7 of Chapter 4 of Title 49 of the Official Code of Georgia Annotated relating to kidnapping, false imprisonment, and related
Public
offenses.
Safety.
Senate Bill 395 by Senator Watson of the 1st and others. A bill to be titled an act to amend Article 4 of Chapter 7 of Title 31 of the OCGA relating to the county and municipal hospital authorities so as to revise the standard of indigency relating to proportioning of proceeds from state sale or lease of a
Health
hospital.
and Human Services.
Senate Bill 396 by Senator Walker of the 20th and others. A bill to be titled an act to amend Article 3 of Chapter 3 of Title 50 of the OCGA relating to state symbols so as to designate the pecan as the official state nut, to provide for related matters, to repeal conflicting laws.
Agriculture.
Senate Bill 397 by Senator Walker of the 20th and others. A bill to be titled an act to amend Article 3 of Chapter 27 of Title 50 of the OCGA relating to bona fide coin-operated amusement machines so as to change the number of bona fide coin-operated amusement
Regulated
machines.
Industries.
Senate Bill 398 by Senator Harrell of the 40th and others. A bill to be titled an act to amend Part 15 of Article 6 of Chapter 2 of Title 20 of the OCGA relating to miscellaneous provisions under the basic quality
Education and Youth.
Senate Bill 399 by Senator Harbison of the 15th, a bill to be titled an act to amend an act to create a Board of Elections and Registration for Macon County to provide for its powers and duties, approved
State and local government.
Senate Bill 400 by Senator Parent of the 42nd and others, a bill to be titled an act to amend Code Section 16161.3 of Official Code of Georgia Annotated relating to the Move On When Ready Act and dual credit courses so as to require the Office of Student
Higher
Achievement.
Education.
Senate Bill 401 by Senator Brass of the 28th and others, a bill to be titled an act to amend Chapter 27 of Title 43 of the OCGA relating to nursing home administrators. So
Health and Human Services.
That completes the order, Mr. President.
First reading in reference of House bills and resolutions, please.
House Bill 758 by Representative Powell of the 32nd and others. A bill to be titled an act to amend Part 1 of Article 3 of Chapter 1 of Title 40 of the OCGA relating to the Georgia Motor Carrier Act of 2012 so as to prohibit the consideration of
Insurance and Labor.
House Bill 765 by Representative Scogans of the 14th and others. A bill to be titled an act to amend Title 15 of the OCGA relating to courts so as to provide for an increase in the minimum compensation for
State and local government general.
House Bill 792 by Representative Ralston of the 7th and others, a bill to be titled an act to amend an act making and providing appropriations for the state fiscal year beginning July 1st, 2019.
Appropriations.
House Bill 803 by Representative Green of the 151st, a bill to be titled an act to provide a homestead exemption from early county school district ad valorem taxes for educational.
State and local government.
House Bill 860 by Representative Williams of the 145th and others, a bill to be titled an act to provide for a non-binding advisory referendum for the purpose of
State and local government.
House Bill 869 by Representative Glanton of the 75th and others, a bill to be titled an act to amend an act creating the Clayton County Water Authority, approved March 7th, 1955, as
State and local
amended.
government.
House Bill 871 by Representative Holmes of the 129th, a bill to be entitled an act to create the Jasper County Public Facilities Authority to provide for the appointment of members.
State and local government.
House Bill 872 by Representative Burno of the 77th and others, a bill to be titled an act to authorize the Magistrate Court of Clayton County to impose and collect county law library fees as part of the court costs.
State and local government.
House Bill 873 by Representative Holmes, 129th, and others, a bill to be titled an act to amend an act to create a joint county municipal
State and
board.
local government.
House Bill 874 by Representative Holmes, 129th, and others, a bill to be titled an act to authorize the governing authority of Butts County to levy an excise tax pursuant to subsection.
State and local government.
House Bill 875 by Representative Nix of the 69th and others, a bill to be titled an act to amend an act to create the Carroll County Water Authority, approved
State and
April.
local government.
House Bill 876 by Representative Rhodes of the 120th, a bill to be entitled an act to amend an act to create the Greene County Airport Authority, approved March 13th.
State and local government.
House Bill 884 by Representative Houston of the 107th and others, 170th and others, a bill to be titled an act to authorize the governing authority of the city of Tifton to levy an excise
State and
tax.
local government.
House Bill 889 by Representative Morris, the 156th, a bill to be titled an act to create the Toombs County Public Facilities Authority and to provide for the appointment of members of the authority to confer.
State and local government.
That completes order, Mr. President.
Secretary will now read reports of standing committees, please.
Mr. President, the Senate Retirement Committee has had under consideration the following legislation and has instructed me to report the same back to the Senate with the following recommendation. Senate Bill 294 do pass, respectfully submitted by Senator Black of the 8th District Chair. Mr. President, the Senate Committee on Health and Human Services has had under consideration the following legislation and has instructed me to report the same back to the Senate with the following recommendation. Senate Bill 340 do pass. Senate Resolution 546 do pass. Senate Bill 272 do pass. Senate Bill 359 do pass by substitute, respectfully submitted by Senator Watson of the 1st District Chair. Mr. President, the Senate Committee on Public Safety has had under consideration the following legislation and has instructed me to report the same back to the Senate with the following recommendation. Senate Bill 336 do pass. Senate Bill 341 do pass. Senate Bill 342 do pass, respectfully submitted by Senator Albers of the 56th District Chair. That completes the order, Mr. President.
Secretary will now read bills and resolutions for the second time.
Senate Bill 309 by Senator Stone of the 23rd and others, Georgia Municipal and Local Government Infrastructure Finance Authority Act, comprehensive regulation of local government infrastructure financing. Provide. That completes the order, Mr. President.
All right, it's now time for our morning roll call. It is now time for our morning roll call. Are there any motions to excuse? Chair recognizes the senator from the 33rd.
Thank you, and good morning, Mr. President. I ask for unanimous consent to excuse the senators from the 22nd and 38th for business inside the Capitol.
Without objection, the senators from the 22nd and the 38th are excused. Chair recognizes the senator from the 40th.
Good morning, Mr. President. I ask for unanimous consent to excuse the senator from the 39th.
Without objection, the senator from the 39th is excused. The chair recognizes the senator from the 50th.
Good morning, Mr. President. I ask unanimous consent to excuse the senator from the 47th.
Without objection, the senator from the 47th is excused. The chair recognizes the senator from the 44th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I ask for unanimous consent to excuse the senator from the 43rd.
Without objection, the senator from the 43rd is excused. The chair recognizes the senator from the 55th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I ask unanimous consent to excuse the senator from the 39th. Oh, you did that?
We'll excuse the senator from the 39th twice,
Again?
if that works. Chair recognizes this, must be really far away. Chair recognizes the senator from the 24th.
Mr. President, I'd like to excuse the senator from the 23rd outside the Capitol business.
Without objection, the senator from the 23rd is excused. Chair recognizes the senator from the 25th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to ask for unanimous consent to excuse the senator from the 7th.
Without objection, the senator from the 7th is excused. Any additional motions to excuse? Secretary will call the roll of senators. Signify your presence by voting the yea switch. The Secretary will unlock the machine. All right, before we get rolling with our day here, I want to take a moment and have an opportunity to recognize a distinguished former Senator. Mitch Seaball is with us today. Thank you, Senator. Appreciate you coming. Thank you. All right, it's now time for our morning devotional. And I'd like to ask that all senators please take your seats. All senators, please take your seats and cease all audible conversations. Also like to ask that our doorkeepers secure the doors. Chair would like to recognize the senator from the 16th to lead us in our pledge and to introduce to us our chaplain of the day.
The American flag.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Georgia flag.
I pledge allegiance to the Georgia flag and to the principles for which it stands, wisdom, justice, and moderation.
Well, this morning we have no stranger to our midst. Dr. Your mind just goes away. George Dillard III. He is a pastor of Peachtree City Christian Church. He also has brought with him his senior adults called the Rough Riders for support. We want to recognize them up in the up there, and we're glad to have y'all with us today from that standpoint. Yeah, give them a hand. They're good. And George is always entertaining. He always has a word, and I always have enjoyed him as he comes. He's very active in our community, not only in his church, but in the community as well, and he does a phenomenal job. And I look forward to hearing him this morning, and if you'll give him your attention, I believe he'll bless you, and you'll hear something you've not heard before. Come right on, sir.
Thank you, Senator. It's good to see each and every one of you this morning. I think it might rain, and so I hope you're prepared. When I was a young boy, my dad owned a hardware store, and when I was 12 years old one day, a lady came in. She had a mixer for cakes and things like that, and she said she wanted to return it. Trouble is, she didn't have a cord, she didn't have any beaters, she didn't have anything. And my dad said, "How much do you think it's worth?" She said, $20. Well, it's in 1970, that would be about $133 today. And so at 12 years old, I was curious. I walked over to where we kept all that type of stuff and looked around, and sure enough, there was the box, there was the beaters, there was the cord. So I went back over and to my dad, and I started tugging on his sleeve, and I said, "Daddy." He said, "Hush, son." I said, "Daddy." He said, "Hush, son." He took $20 out, gave it to the woman, sent her on her way. As soon as she got out of the door, I said, "Daddy, she stole that mixer." He said, "I know, son." I said, why didn't you do something? He said, "Obviously she needed $20 more than we did." You know, I learned something that day. In fact, I learned quite a bit, and I think about it from time to time. One of the things that I learned is the way I respond to people is not determined by the way they respond to me. That just because somebody steals from me doesn't mean I have to steal from them. Just because, in fact, Jesus said, turn the other cheek, didn't he? My dad taught me a lot. You know, another thing he taught me is just because you disagree with me does not mean I'm wrong. See, I disagreed with my dad vehemently, but he was not wrong. And then I think the most important thing is that sometimes we just have to go beyond what the world says to do. You know, I don't know if we think about this often enough, but in 1776, George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, John Adams, James Madison, John Monroe, Benjamin Franklin, the list goes on, were all criminals. They had violated the law of the land, but they had done so for the common good. You know, Jesus said this, when you've done it unto the least of these, you've done it unto me. They said, what are you talking about, Jesus? Jesus said, well, I was hungry. You didn't feed me. I was naked and you did not clothe me. I was in prison and you ignored me. They said, when did we do those things? And Jesus said, when you've done it to each other, you've done it to me. You know, I'd like for us to be the kind of state that cares about people above everything. You know, this afternoon I'm going to do a funeral for a father and a son who died in a plane crash in Clark County. And I tell people this every time I go to do that type of service. There are two things in this life that matter: who you love and who loves you. And that's it. And love seeks the other person's highest good. And it is my prayer that this august body is a body driven by the principles of care above self for others. Let's pray. Father, we love you and we thank you for loving us. Help us, teach us to love one another. Father, help us to understand that we're not always going to agree, but we can come to agreement. We're not always going to see the way, but we can together find the way. Father, that we don't know what the future holds, but we do know the one who holds the future. So bless this body, bless the state, bless this nation, but most of all, help us to bless others. In Jesus' name, amen.
Yeah, mine does too, and he's still teaching every day. That was great.
No, this is,
All right, we're going to introduce our doctor of the day, and I'd like to call upon the senator from the 36th to do so.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, I'm so happy to present to you Dr. Rashawn Hodge, our doctor of the day. He received his Bachelor of Arts in Psychology from Morehouse College. You can always tell a Morehouse man.
That's right.
And some say you can't tell them
Can't
much.
tell 'em
Can't tell them
much.
much. But we are proud to have this Morehouse man in our midst today. It is not his first time joining us as Doctor of the Day. His medical degree was earned from the Robert Wood Johnson Medical School, and he completed his residency in family medicine from the Morehouse School of Medicine in 2005. Dr. Hodge's passion is aimed at making the human condition better for those who are suffering. His compassion for those in need is exemplified through his leadership of several hospice programs throughout Georgia, critically important programs across our state. As both a medical director and the assistant medical director, he serves on the board of directors for the Sickle Cell Foundation of Georgia and as medical director for Premier Chronic Pain Care right here in our capital city of Atlanta. In his spare time, Dr. Hodge loves spending time with his son and is continuing to pursue his goal of one day becoming an international missionary. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Hodge as our Doctor of the Day.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Orrick, for the great introduction. Again, my name is Dr. Hodge. Ladies and gentlemen of the Senate, thank you for what you guys do for our great state. As the good Reverend reminded us, it's care above self. That's something I live by. It's I call it empathy. So let's continue to put Georgians first and develop the best health care in the world. If you guys need me, I'm downstairs in the doctor's office. So any flu symptoms, if you've been down, dopamine depleted, depressed a little bit, your interest's been off, any guilt and feelings, come by and holler at me, okay? God bless.
Are there any unanimous consents? Chair sees none. We have a number of special guests with us today, and I'd like to call upon the Secretary to read the resolution for our first set of special guests.
Senate Resolution 725 by Senator Orrick of the 36th and others, a resolution recognizing February 20th, 2020 as Lupus Advocacy Day at the state capitol and for other purposes. Whereas lupus is an acute and chronic lifelong autoimmune disease in which the immune system is unbalanced, causing inflammation and tissue damage to virtually every organ system in the body. And whereas at least 1.5 million Americans, including approximately 55,000 Georgians, are currently living with lupus. And whereas the Lupus Foundation of America is the nation's leading nonprofit voluntary health organization dedicated to finding the causes and a cure for lupus while providing support and services to all people affected by lupus. Now therefore it be resolved by the Senate that the members of this body commend the work of the Georgia chapter of the Lupus Foundation of America and other organizations devoted to finding a cure for lupus and to supporting the individuals and families whose lives are affected by this autoimmune disease, and recognize February 20th, 2020 as Lupus Advocacy Day at the state capitol. That completes the order, Mr. President.
Is there objection to adoption of the resolution? The chair hears none, and the resolution is adopted. Chair would like to call upon the senator from the 36th to introduce our special guest today.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, we annually have a recognition day for lupus to advocate for seeking cures for lupus and to build up the council that has been created in state government for lupus awareness and activism. I want to just spend a minute. You have information on your desks. I never heard of lupus until I was grown, and a friend of mine was diagnosed. I've since learned a great deal about it, and sometimes it takes years to diagnose. People suffer for a lifetime with this chronic condition. We have a Georgia chapter here that just continues to grow and amaze. And you know, we as government, we look to the advocacy community, the service delivery community, the nonprofit community to be partners in meeting the needs of our citizens. And this Georgia chapter of the Lupus Foundation, lupusgeorgia.org, does that beautifully. There are more than 30 support groups across the state. They're working in 115 of our counties. They provide patient navigators, statewide symposiums, a statewide empowerment summit in Atlanta, monthly teleconference calls, advocacy and awareness in Georgia, and they go to Washington. Our congressional delegation in Washington hears from our lupus advocates that go up there annually at a minimum. I want to bring to you now Chris Reed, who serves as the statewide chair of advocacy for Lupus Georgia. And I've known him for some time. He replaced a colleague that we have in the House, Representative Kim Schofield, who came down here for 10 years advocating for lupus awareness. I met her when she was a citizen advocating for it. So please give us your attention and take this information to heart and be a voice back in your communities to support the families that are coping with lupus and to support our statewide council. Let me bring to you Chris Reed, the statewide advocacy chair for Lupus Georgia.
Good morning, Lieutenant Governor Duncan, state senators, Senator Orrick especially, for acknowledging this as Lupus Awareness Day, or Lupus Advocacy Day, excuse me. I would like to acknowledge our advocates who are in the gallery with us, if they could please stand. Wonderful, wonderful. We're going to turn this gold dome purple today. I would like to introduce to you a young woman I met about 6 months ago. Actually, two young women I met about 6 months ago. Jennifer Merkel and Elizabeth Merkel live in Lawrenceville, Georgia. Jennifer runs a daycare out of her home. She goes to school. And Elizabeth is 13 years old. She's on the lacrosse team at school and in 7th grade. And they're going to talk to you a little bit about how lupus has impacted their life. So I want to thank you all for listening.
Thank you. Good morning. As you said, my name is Jennifer Merkel, and I am one of the facilitators for the Lupus Foundation's Parent Project, which is a support group for children and with lupus and their parents. And just over a year ago, my daughter Elizabeth was diagnosed with lupus at the age of 12. And she's one of the 5,000 to 10,000 children and one of the 1.5 million Americans with lupus. And I could stand up here and give you all kinds of statistics, but my Lizzie is not a statistic. She is beautiful and she's smart, she's funny. She dances all the time, even in the grocery store. She plays lacrosse and she's very artistic. She sings in our school's chorus and she is teaching herself to play the piano. She enjoys science, and she's fascinated by anything that has to do with space. She has so much to offer this world, and I tell her almost daily, lupus does not define you. But the truth is that she lives in the shadow of lupus, and she always will, unless we find a cure. Her reality involves a lot of daily medications with all kinds of side effects, sunscreen even on cloudy days, lots of doctor's appointments, missed days of school, monthly blood tests. Her symptoms include muscle pain, fatigue, stomach aches, and headaches and rashes, and she's one of the lucky ones that hasn't had any organ involvement yet. We live our lives on guard, waiting for the call from the school nurse, scouring over the results of every blood test, scared that every rash is the sign of a flare beginning. A mother's worry when our child has a chronic illness is indescribable. 14 days ago was the 1-year anniversary of her diagnosis, and we joked around. We said, what do we call this, a loop-anniversary? You know, do we celebrate it? What do we do? And we decided that we were not going to celebrate lupus, obviously, but we were going to celebrate her bravery, her strength, and her perseverance. She has learned through living with lupus that she can do hard things. She's here today to learn to advocate for herself. And while my faith has enabled me to focus on our blessings, one of my greatest desires is for her to be able to live a life without lupus. So I'm thankful for your past commitment to funding research and resources, in addition to the much-needed help it provides hope. I ask that you continue that commitment. I want to watch my daughter grow and thrive despite lupus, and hopefully one day see her be cured. She deserves that, and the world deserves to have her in it at her best. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and let me thank and recognize the colleagues that have shared in wearing purple today in honor of this day, and the advocacy that many of you, Donzella James certainly as a senator, longtime advocate on this issue. Take this back to your communities. 55,000 Georgians right now are diagnosed with lupus. Those numbers will grow, and we have a job to do. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you. Thank you.
Mr. Secretary, please read the resolution for our next set of special guests.
Senate Resolution 694 by Senator Harper of the 7th and others. A resolution recognizing and commending the Chattahoochee-Marion Forestry Unit on being named the Georgia Forestry Commission 2019 North Georgia Unit of the Year, the Baker-Mitchell Forestry Unit on being named the 2019 South Georgia Unit of the Year, Area 4 on being named the 2019 Forestry Protection Area of the Year, and Region 2 on being named the 2019 Forest Management Region of the Year, and for other purposes. Whereas the mission of the Georgia Forestry Commission is to help provide leadership, service, and education in the protection and conservation of Georgia's forest resources. And whereas the accomplishments of these forestry units, forest protection areas, and forest management regions are a clear indication of their dedication and teamwork, their willingness to take on additional responsibilities, and the consistently high level of forestry services provided over the course of many years, despite limited personal resources. Now therefore be resolved by the Senate that the members of this body recognize and commend the Chattahoochee-Marion Forestry Unit on being named the Georgia Forestry Commission's 2019 North Georgia Unit of the Year, the Baker-Mitchell Forestry Unit on being named the 2019 South Georgia Unit of the Year, Area 4 on being named the 2019 Forest Protection Area of the Year, and Region 2 on being named the 2019 Forest Management Region of the Year. That completes the order, Mr. President.
Is there objection to adoption of the resolution? The chair hears none, and the resolution is adopted. Chair would like to call upon the senator from the 7th to introduce our special guest today.
Thank you, Mr. President. Ladies and gentlemen of the Senate, it is always an honor to welcome our men and women who serve in our Georgia forestry units across the state, as well as honor their distinct service and their excellent service, and commend the ones that have especially gone above and beyond and been named our units of the year. So, as many of you may or may not know, if you don't, I'm going to tell you, Georgia is the #1 forestry state in the nation. And we would not be able to hold that title as the #1 forestry state in the nation if it worked for our men and women within our Georgia forestry units across our state and making sure that our forest resources continue to be protected on a day-to-day basis. So this morning we're here to congratulate the Chattahoochee-Marion Forestry Unit on being named the North Georgia Unit of the Year, the Baker-Mitchell Forestry Unit on being named the 2019 South Georgia Unit of the Year, Area 4 and being named the Protection Area of the Year, and Region 2 as the Forest Management Region of the Year. I know we have some individuals with the Georgia Forestry Commission up in the gallery. Why don't you stand so we can give you a round of applause, as well as the ones behind me, and thank you for your service to our state. These forestry units go above and beyond every day in making sure we continue to express our efforts in forest management, water quality efforts, wildfire prevention, reforestation, community education, outreach, and last but not least, natural disaster and hurricane relief. As many of you know, the Georgia Forestry Commission stepped up to the plate when Hurricane Michael come through our state, and we want to continue to commend them for their work in that effort, as well as other natural disaster issues. So congratulations to these guys and these units. I commend you on your hard work. And at this time, I'm going to ask Scott Griffin, who's the Forest Management Chief with the Georgia Forestry Commission, to come forward and introduce the guys that are up here on the rostrum and bring a few greetings. Scott?
Good morning, everybody. Thanks for having us. We really appreciate being here. It's a great honor to be here. And as you know, forestry is important to our state. Senator Harper just mentioned we are the #1 forestry state in the nation, and our agency is privileged to help protect and conserve this valuable asset, this 24 million acres of forest land that we're blessed with in Georgia. It's an important job. It's one that we take seriously. And when you get to the core of our agency, it's dirt and steel. That's who we are. When you get to the core of our agency, you find these foresters and rangers. They're our backbone. So we're glad to be able to be here to recognize them as our top performers for 2019. So I'm going to mention these guys that are on the stage with me individually. Keith Murphy, he's with our Region 2 Region of the Year. Don't be afraid to raise your hand. Raise your hand, Keith. There you go. We have Danny Gore, he's with Area 4 Area of the Year. We have Chris Dunn. He's with our Northern Unit of the Year, Baker Mitchell County. And last but not least, we have our Southern Unit of the Year, represented Baker Mitchell, Chris Cross. Right. All right, Chris is not shy. All right, but so thanks for recognizing us today. And again, we thank you for having us. And as always, we appreciate your service and commitment to our great state. Thank you.
Mr. Secretary, will you read the resolution for our next special guest today?
Senate Resolution 757 by Senator Parent of the 42nd and others. A resolution commending the L'Arche movement for its pioneering status as a community where people with disabilities find true belonging and invite others to find belonging with them, and recognizing February 20th, 2020 as L'Arche Atlanta Day at the state capitol and for other purposes. Whereas the L'Arche movement began in 1964 in France and came to Georgia in 2002. And whereas this group envisioned a community of people with and without disabilities, where everyone has their rightful place in society, where people with disabilities can contribute their indispensable gifts to the human family. And whereas in a world where people with disabilities tend to be segregated away from the rest of society, the L'Arche home has become a celebrated symbol of belonging and integration for people with disabilities in Georgia, as well as the cornerstone of a movement much bigger than the home where hundreds of people with and without disabilities regularly socialize together. Now therefore be resolved by the Senate that the members of this body recognize February 20th, 2020 as L'Arche Atlanta Day at the state capitol and commend the L'Arche movement for its pioneering status as a community where people with disabilities find true belonging and invite others to find belonging with them. That completes the order, Mr. President.
Is there objection to adoption of the resolution? The chair hears none, and the resolution is adopted. I'd like to ask for the undivided attention of everybody in this chamber as we introduce our special guest here today. Chair would like to recognize the senator from the 42nd.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues and members of the audience, it is my honor to mark today as L'Arche Atlanta Day at the state capitol. Yesterday, I know many of us were visited by individuals advocating on behalf of people with disabilities within our communities. So it's particularly appropriate that we are recognizing L'Arche Atlanta today. L'Arche Atlanta is a very special community that provides supportive housing for people with disabilities. The first home opened in 2012 in Decatur, where 4 people with intellectual disabilities live and share life with 5 people without disabilities, forming a mutually supportive family. Just like any other typical Georgian, people with intellectual disabilities want to live independently, have a meaningful job, and belong to a community of friends. One of the ways that we make this possible is through Medicaid, comp, and now waivers that provide funding these critical support services, like personal care, job coaching, and transportation. This is a joint federal and state program, and the federal dollars match our state dollars 2-to-1 on the waivers. Right now here in Georgia, we have over 6,000 people with intellectual disabilities on the wait list for a waiver, and many of the families supporting these individuals struggle to make ends meet due to the burden of care. This makes it more difficult on an economic basis, not just for the families who can't go to work if they are engaged solely in caring for their loved one with an intellectual disability, but that limits their own ability to be not only economically mobile, but also tax-paying members of our society. For the first time in many years, maybe ever, we don't have any additional now and comp waivers in the proposed budget. And as the budget makes its way through the Senate and the House, I hope that we do see how important it is to assist those with intellectual disabilities to live independent and fulfilling lives, and also to allow their families to be able to be tax-paying citizens. The adults who live at L'Arche have a rich and full life because of the work of L'Arche, but also due to our work funding now and comp waivers. Let's join together to create more opportunities like this for Georgians on the wait list and their families who are struggling. Right now, I'm going to introduce to you Tim Moore. He's the executive director of L'Arche Atlanta, and he's going to bring some remarks to us. Also joining us today are Liz Barrett, Terry Hochschild, Becca Van Galder, and Corbin McKinnon. Tim, please come forward.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Senator Parent, for this recognition. Our vision is a world where everyone belongs. And what we've learned from our experience is when that happens, it's not just the folks with intellectual disabilities who benefit, but it's our neighborhoods as well. Case in point, we are about to purchase and renovate another home where 4 people with intellectual disabilities will live. And during the zoning process, we got wind that there were 2 neighbors who, well, let's just say they weren't very happy about a group home coming to their neighborhood. So we got on the phones ourselves and we called some neighbors and we asked them to come and speak at that commission meeting themselves and speak about their experience being neighbors to L'Arche. One that ended up coming to speak was a middle school student who overheard me asking her mother. And she said, "Mommy, I want to help." So she wrote and she memorized a 5-minute speech that she gave before the city commission, in which she said, "When I walk to school every morning, I can look in the yard and I can see Terry and he waves at me." This is Terry right here. And they built a friendship. And she talked about how when she comes into the house, she can't help but feel the love of the core members, the people with disabilities in our community. That relationship clearly transformed her, and she will forever be an advocate for people with disabilities, as a middle schooler willing to speak on behalf. 17 other neighbors, by the way, came and spoke, and not a single naysayer ended up speaking afterwards. Folks, when we make belonging a priority for people with disabilities, it doesn't just impact them, it impacts our neighborhoods. Thank you for supporting now and comp waivers.
Senate Resolution 762 by Senator Jackson of the 2nd and others, a resolution commending Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated and the Georgia District chapters and recognizing February 20th, 2020 as Alpha Phi J at the state capitol and for other purposes. Whereas Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated was founded by 7 young men on December 4th, 1906, and whereas Alpha Phi Alpha College and graduate chapters have worked diligently and tirelessly to help correct the educational, economic, political, and social injustices facing African Americans through various programs and endeavors. And whereas numerous members have called the state of Georgia home, most notably Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Mayor Marion Jackson, Ambassador Andrew Young, Georgia Supreme Court Justice Robert Benham, and Congressman David Scott. And now therefore be it resolved by the Senate that the members of this body commend Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated and the Georgia District chapters for their outstanding contributions to this nation and the state of Georgia, and recognize February 20th, 2020 as Alpha Phi Day at the state capitol. That completes the order, Mr. President.
Is there objection to adoption of the resolution? The chair hears none, and the resolution is adopted. I'd like to call upon the senator from the 2nd to introduce our special guest today.
Good morning, members. Today we celebrate Alpha Phi Alpha Day at our state capitol. Alpha Phi Alpha is a service fraternity founded in 1906 by outstanding young men that wanted to change for better, wanted to change for achievement, wanted to change the better life of all mankind. They have 36,000 members nationwide, 3,000 active members in the state of Georgia. Some of their noted members are Dr. Martin Luther King, Ambassador Andrew Young, former Mayor Marion Jackson. They have numerous programs as mentoring programs, voter education programs, block building grant programs, and service programs. Alpha Phi Alpha does a lot for the state, it does a lot for this nation. At this time, we will recognize Mr. Ellis Albert, the president of the local regional chapter, to speak.
Mr. President, today the men of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, the nation's oldest African-American Greek-lettered organization, have come to these hallowed grounds, advocating for quality schools that are fully funded, neighborhoods that are safe, policing that is not discriminatory, voting that is free of barriers, and health care that is available to all citizens, regardless of the community in which they reside or the amount of wealth they may have accumulated. We come with inspiring dreams and insightful visions, with faith in a brighter tomorrow and hope for a better future, a future where the color of one's skin will not be an issue. Whether you represent a red or blue district, being a Republican, Democrat, conservative, moderate, or liberal will not be a concern. The late Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King said that taking the first step, even when you don't see the full staircase, we can create a better future by taking steps to end the dropout to prison pipeline, by fully funding education and not building prisons to house them, and to take steps to build and connect citizens of all races, creeds, and colors, not build walls of separation and boundaries of discrimination. On behalf of the men of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, I thank you, God bless you, and may you look for a better future that we all can live together and get along together. Thank you.
You know, these guys picked me up at the airport one time. I wonder if you remember that. Oh, heck yeah, man. You keep getting bigger. You're getting bigger, too. Tell your mom I said hello. All right. All right, we've got some special guests with us today, and I'd like to call upon the senator from the 3rd to introduce them today.
Thank you, Mr. President. It is always good to have people from home come up and visit you at the Capitol, and today we have a group from Camden County. They're in the gallery. But they brought 2 very special young men with them today, 2 men that I'm very, very proud of. They're students at Camden County High School. We have Desmond Fogle and Ellis Davis. Desmond is a senior, Ellis is a junior. They're both excelling academically, taking advanced placement classes, dual enrollment. They're also leaders in the school. They're involved in FCA. In fact, Desmond was president of that organization last year. But this year, Ellis was elected chairman of the Teen Republicans and Desmond vice chairman of the Teen Republicans. And I tell you, with such talent and excellence, I have no doubt that one day they will occupy one of the seats in this chamber. So join me in just commending them for their excellent work and representing our state and our area well. Oh, and Desmond's going to the University of Connecticut next year on an athletic scholarship to play linebacker. So let's give them a big hand. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, let's go grab a picture. All right, today must be Alumni Day here, and I didn't know about it. We've got another distinguished former senator with us. Bill Hamrick's with us on the floor today. Thank you, sir. Thanks for coming to see us. All right, it is that time. Does any senator wish to rise on a point of personal privilege? Chair sees none. You have a... I thought I got out lucky. Chair recognizes the senator from the 2nd for a point of personal privilege.
Thank you, Mr. President. As we're aware, today is Alpha Phi Alpha Day, and one of the mentoring programs is from Savannah, Georgia. They call Alpha Bears. They're middle school kids that have the Alpha Phi Alpha fraternity as their mentors. They are their guides, they are their leaders. They take them on trips like to the Capitol, they take them on college fairs, and they expose them to what's good about our state, what's good about our country. I'd like to recognize the Alpha Bears from Savannah, Georgia in our gallery today. Thank you for being here with us.
All right, the chair recognizes the anxious senator from the 33rd for the point of personal privilege.
Thank you, Mr. President, my fellow senators, colleagues, and y'all. This is our Black History moment because this is Black History Month. Remembered as a key abolitionist and forerunner in the fight for women's rights, Sojourner Truth was born into slavery around 1797. After escaping with her infant daughter in 1826, Truth became the first African-American woman to successfully challenge the court securing the freedom of her son. A passionate orator and outspoken advocate for both racial equality and women's rights, Sojourner spent much of her life traveling the eastern and midwestern states delivering poignant lectures which exposed the evils of slavery and pleaded for social reform. Despite having no formal education, Truth consistently captivated audiences across the country. In her famous Ain't I a Woman speech delivered at the National Women's Suffrage Convention in 1851, Truth artfully made listeners aware of the anguish of the downtrodden and oppressed. Using little more than brazen rhetoric and heart-trending stories from her experience as a slave, Truth won thousands over to the cause of abolitionists. During the Civil War, Truth helped recruit thousands of black troops for the Union Army, and after the war, Truth worked tirelessly to secure land grants from the federal government for slaves. And that is your your Black History moment. I yield the well.
Chair would like to recognize the senator from the 45th for a point of personal privilege.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the Senate. First of all, let me thank, and if you'll have an indulgence, just a minute, thanks my caucus for sending me the beautiful flowers that are on my desk today. They're absolutely gorgeous, and they're in the memory of my son, my beloved son. I just want to say thank you. I would like to welcome to the Senate today some very, very special guests. And we have Mercer School of Nursing, and these are the folks on the right-hand side of the gallery, if y'all want to stand up. And they are students in the Advanced Practice Registered Nurse Program. They are already registered nurses, and we are so proud of them. We're always talking about workforce development and shortages of nursing and healthcare professionals in the rural areas. Well, guess what? These are the folks that are going to go make Georgia proud and make Georgia healthier. Let's have a round of applause for them. I'd also like to thank, sitting behind them, another group of very special nurses who take care of people in their direst needs. These are all nurses who are trauma care nurses from Northeast Georgia Medical Healthcare System. If you don't know, their emergency room is one of the busiest emergency rooms in Georgia. They have a catchment area that goes all the way from the North Carolina-Tennessee border that comes down to their emergency rooms, and also down into the metropolitan Atlanta area in Gwinnett County, Hall County, and Forsyth County. We're glad to have them. If y'all want to stand up. These are the folks that you wake up to when you've had that bad accident. We're so proud of you, and thank you for coming to the Senate. We look forward to you also helping the Georgians recover from major injuries. Thank you very much, and I yield the well.
Thank you, Senator. The chair recognizes the senator from the 48th for a point of personal privilege.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise today to recognize the Gwinnett NAACP Family Day at the Capitol. If you are here in attendance in the well, please stand so we can recognize you. The NAACP, founded in February 1909, is the nation's foremost, largest, and most widely recognized civil rights organization. The mission of the NAACP is to secure the political, educational, social, and economic equality of rights in order to eliminate race-based discrimination and ensure the well-being, and health of all persons. The Gwinnett NAACP is very active in our community, and we are very appreciative of all the great work that they do and that they will continue to do. And I encourage you to meet with them and say hi as they come through to advocate on the behalf of the NAACP. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the well.
Thank you, Senator. The chair recognizes the senator from the 35th for a point of personal privilege.
Mr. President, I thank you. Senators and ladies and gentlemen, tomorrow is voter registration day in the state of Georgia. And in room 216 tomorrow morning from 8 until they will have the voting machines available for you to either look at, senators take a photo op with it, because this is the new way. And we have invited all 159 election supervisors and other staff people. So it's going to be a lot of them. Your own people are going to be there. So please, if you can, go down to room 216 tomorrow for voter registration day and talk to and between 8 and 9, they want to ask questions of legislators, so you're invited. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the will.
Thank you, Senator. You have a consent calendar of privileged resolutions before you. Does any senator wish to remove a resolution from the consent calendar? Chair hears none. Is there objection to adoption of the resolution on the consent calendar? The chair hears none. The resolutions on the consent calendar are adopted. Are there any motions to withdraw or commit? All right, here we go. We are now moving on to the rules calendar. We are now moving on to the rules calendar. Ms. Secretary, please read the caption of Senate Bill 134.
Senate Bill number 134, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Article 8 of Chapter 12 of Title 50 of the Official Code of Georgia Annotated relating to the Georgia Commission on the Holocaust so as to reassign the commission for the administrative purposes, to provide for related matters, and for other purposes. Mr. President, the Committee on Urban Affairs offers the following substitute to Senate Bill 134. A bill to be titled an act to amend Article 8 of Chapter 12 of Title 50 of the Official Code of Georgia Annotated relating to the Georgia Commission on the Holocaust so as to reassign the commission for administrative purposes, to provide for related matters, and for other purposes. That completes the order, Mr. President.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 32nd to speak to Senate Bill 134.
Thank you, Mr. President. Fellow senators, I bring you the most complicated, simple bill that you're probably going to hear about this session. This is a bill that relates to the Commission on the Holocaust that may sound very familiar to you from last year. In 2017, the commission was moved for administrative purposes to the Department of Community Affairs. It turned out that DCA had to charge a significant administrative fee of about $15,000 per employee to provide these services. This resulted in a significant financial cost for this small but important state agency and has interfered with their ability to accomplish their educational mission. After lengthy discussions over many months with the Commission, DCA, and the Governor's Office, it has been determined that moving the Commission to the Board of Regents would solve their financial issue and would be a good fit with their educational mission. Their accounting would be done by the State Accounting Office. All the parties are now in agreement, and this bill would allow the Commission to move as soon as signed by the Governor. I'm happy to answer questions and would ask for your favorable consideration.
Senator, you have no questions.
Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the will.
Does any other senator wish to speak for or against the bill? The question is now on the adoption of the committee substitute. Is there objection to the adoption of the committee substitute? Hearing none, the committee substitute is adopted. Is there objection to agreeing to the report of the committee which is favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Is there objection to the main question being ordered? Chair hears none. The main question is ordered. The question is on the passage of the bill by substitute. All those in favor of the bill will vote yea. Opposed, nay. The secretary will unlock the machine. We running a football play here? On the passage of the bill, the yeas are 50, the nays are 0, and this bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed by substitute. For what purpose does the senator from the 32nd rise?
Mr. President, I move that the Senate immediately transmit Senate Bill 134 to the House.
Senator from the 32nd has moved that Senate Bill 134 be immediately transmitted to the House. Is there objection? The chair hears none, and the bill is immediately transmitted. Chair would like to recognize the pro tem for a point of personal privilege.
Thank you, Mr. President. I realize this is a little bit out of order. I wanted to make sure that we recognized a group of individuals here from Gainesville and Hall County. In February of 2016, Don Brewer was driving downtown Gainesville and had a heart attack due to an underlying heart condition. And because of the heroic efforts of the city of Gainesville and the city of Hall County, Mr. Brewer is alive today. Is Mr. Brewer in the audience? Stand up, Don. Let's give him a round of applause. I'd like to thank paramedic Kyle Powers. Y'all ready? 1, 2, 3. There we go. Paramedic Ken Smith. Crystal Britt. Josh Wilson. Chad Cooper. And Palmer Loggins. And I also like to recognize Sybil Allaire, who is a bystander who stopped and really was instrumental in creating this. Would everybody stand up real quick? Thank you. All of you stand up. There we go. There we go. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thanks, Senator. Mr. Secretary, can you please read the caption to Senate Bill 268?
Senate Bill 268 by Senator Jackson of the 2nd. A bill to be titled an act to amend Chapter 17 of Title 45 of the Official Code of Georgia annotated relating to notaries public so as to provide that the identification of persons for whom notaries perform notarial acts shall be evidenced satisfactorily by a valid Veterans Health Identification Card issued by the United States Department of Veterans Affairs, to provide for related matters, to repeal conflicting laws for other purposes. That completes the order, Mr. President.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 2nd to speak to Senate Bill 268.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members of the Senate, we have a chance to do some good today. A very simple bill that does a great deed for our vets, people that sacrifice their lives for our country, people that put our risk to do great work for freedom and justice. Senate Bill 268 is a very simple bill. It permits the valid ID of the Veterans Health Identification Card issued by the United States Department of Veteran Affairs to use to confirm the identity for notary purposes. As you know, in our veteran hospitals, we have a lot of vets that don't have driver license, but to do wills and to do certain contracts, they need some sort of identification. This simple measure uses the Veterans Health Identification Card as valid ID for doing such purposes. I hope that you do something great for our veterans and vote in favor of this measure. Mr. President, if there are no questions, I yield the will.
Senator, you do have a question. The chair recognizes the senator from the 23rd for a question.
Will the senator yield?
Yes, sir.
What is the current status?
Senator, will you suspend for a moment?
Yes.
If I could get the Senate's attention, to give our undivided attention, cease all audible conversations, allow the senator in the well to present the bill, allow the senators to ask the questions as we all have an opportunity to ask. It's a very important measure that we'd like to pay attention to. You can proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. Will a veteran's ID card suffice under current law for notarial services?
Yes, sir. A veteran ID card can suffice also.
This just would extend it to the health card?
Yes, sir, it does.
All right, thank you.
You have no more questions.
Thank you. Mr. President, I yield the will.
Does any other senator wish to speak for or against the measure? Chair hears none. Is there objection to agreeing to the report of the committee which is favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none, and the report of the committee is agreed to. Is there objection to the main question now being ordered? Chair hears none, and the main question is ordered. The question is on the passage of the bill. All those in favor of the bill will vote yea. Opposed, nay. The secretary will unlock the machine. On the passage of the bill, the yeas are 54, the nays are 0. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed. Mr. Secretary, can you please read the caption to Senate Bill 335?
Senate Bill number 335 by Senator Brass of the 28th and others, a bill to be titled an act to amend Article 1 of Chapter 3 of Title 12, Chapter 11 of Title 15, and Chapter 5 of Title 49 of the OCGA relating to general provisions regarding parks, historical areas, memorials, and recreation, juvenile code, and programs of protection for children and youth, respectively, so as to strengthen laws and support for foster children and foster families, to authorize Department of Human Services to partner with child placing agencies to assist with casework services and for other purposes. Mr. President, on February 5th, 2020, the Senate Committee on Judiciary recommends that this bill do pass by substitute, respectively submitted by Senator Stone of the 23rd. Chair.
Chair recognizes the senator. Oh, go ahead. Continue.
Mr. President, the Senate Judiciary Committee offers the following substitute to Senate Bill 335, a bill to be titled an act to amend Article 1 of Chapter 3 of Title 12, Chapter 11 of Title 15, and Chapter 5 of Title 49 of the Official Code of Georgia annotated, relating to general provisions regarding parks, historic areas, memorials, and recreation, juvenile code, and programs and protection for children and youth, respectively, so as to strengthen laws and supports for foster children and foster families, to provide for definitions and for other purposes. Mr. President, Senator Brass of the 28th and Senator Mullis of the 53rd offer the following amendment. Number 1, amend the Senate Judiciary Committee substitute to Senate Bill 335 by deleting foster children and foster family members on line 6, by deleting lines 23 through 27 and inserting in lieu thereof of the following. Or pursuant to the authority of the department shall be waived for any foster parent, relative, or fictive kin who is serving as the primary placement for a child in the temporary or permanent custody of the Division of Family and Children's Services of the Department of Human Services. That completes the order, Mr. President.
Chair would like to recognize the senator from the 28th to speak to the bill and the amendment for an issue that I know is important to all of us that are in this chamber.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, members of this body. I bring to you today a very important bill. It's on an issue that's been overlooked in this state for far too long. You know, we've got over 12,000 kids in foster care, and their graduation rate is just north of 10%. So that means of over that 12,000, about 1,200 are going to graduate from high school next year. That's not good. And there's worse stats. Females coming out of foster care in their first year, there's a 70% chance they are going to get pregnant. We've got to do better as a state. And this bill helps get us in that direction. So I'm going to walk you through the bill. Section 1 deals with foster children and their parents and basically giving them free admission into state parks. The amendment, and I'll go ahead and address the amendment, this actually came from DNR. We're making a quick change to basically track it with the foster parents, so you'll kind of see that with the amendment. And it just makes it easier for DNR, giving them the ability to offer that service to these kids free of charge, and to the foster families. But the meat of the bill really gets into Section 2. There's current code that mandates deadlines to keep dependency cases on track and moving through juvenile court. The problem is we don't really track it. So really what we're going to do here is we're going to require the juvenile courts and the judicial circuits to actually start tracking these dependency cases from start to finish. No penalties, nothing like that, but we just need to know. We need to know how long they're taking. We need to know if they're keeping up with the code that does mandate these deadlines. And that way, if they're not keeping up, we need to know where. We need to know why. And then that way we can figure out where to reallocate our resources. Also in Section 2, it actually turned into a little bit of some cleanup language. There were some old code section that was putting the rulemaking with our juvenile council. And it actually should be with our Supreme Court, with that council being there for reference. So that just turned into a little bit of cleanup language. Then Section 3, right now attorneys can delay a foster care case due to routine Superior Court and state court matters in both civil and criminal cases. So this bill is simply going to prioritize these dependency cases and your termination of parental rights cases. We're going to actually give them priority over any non-jury trials. Section 4, this deals with our child placement agencies and their partnerships with DFACS. There's certain criteria and certain federal law that will prevent this. So we actually left this intently pretty vague, but we're actually authorizing or giving DFACS the ability to contract with more of these CPAs, again, where federal law does not contradict that. And we just think this is going to help lighten the load of our caseworkers, because a lot of times you have these duplicative services. Sometimes you've got a case manager from the child placement agency, and you've got a case manager from DFACS working with that same child. And so if we can get that down to one, we think that'll help build a little bit more trust with that child and better serve that child. Section 4, it deals with the training and for our regular foster parents and our respite foster families. So right now, no matter how experienced you are as a foster family or if you're a respite family, and a respite family are these families that come in temporary situations and help out with the foster family, giving temporary relief, might take that child for a weekend or maybe just a day or two, but they're all required, no matter how long they've been doing this, they're all required to have 15 hours of training per year and 26 hours of training that's certified on the front end. So what we're going to do here is we're going to allow DFACS to modify the training requirements for experienced families. We don't mention anything about time, changing the amount of time. It's just we're actually allowing them to offer different or varying levels of training to these families. So with that, Mr. President, that pretty much concludes the bill, and I'll be more than happy to take questions.
The chair would like to recognize the senator from the 48th for a question.
Thank you, Mr. President. Does the chairman yield?
Let me think about it. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I direct you to the training section of the bill, lines 217 through 221.
Gotcha.
And wonder, how are we defining experienced foster parents?
We are not defining it. That will be defined by the department. We're giving them the leeway to do that. Right now, they do not.
They do not. Okay. And the way I'm reading this is with the commas. So it's experienced foster parents, the age and needs of the foster child and children, and respite care. So there's 3 options there. It's not just respite care. Is that correct?
Right. We're giving the department the ability to vary the levels of training for those 3 subcategories.
And what is the basis of the department for requesting being able to change training requirements?
What is the basis for what I just said when I presented the bill? I mean, an experienced family doesn't necessarily need to go through the exact same training that a brand new family should have to go through. A respite family who's only doing this on a temporary basis shouldn't have to go through the same training, exact same training as someone that's been doing it for 20 years. And the idea here is to let's get more families involved. Let's get more families that want to be respite families, and then maybe that'll lead to more families that want to be foster families. And then the ultimate goal is maybe that'll lead to more adoptions.
Does the chairman further yield?
Of course.
Thank you, sir. My concern is the current overload of the workers in DFACS monitoring this program such that I'm worried that people are monitoring and making sure that these families have the minimal levels of experience. And so my concern is that how are we monitoring this training and making sure it's happening and monitoring the quality of those families?
The same way they're doing it now. I mean, they
Which
have
is?
a process now. I can't tell you what that process is. I don't know it.
And
But we're not changing that. We're not changing who's monitoring and how they're monitoring. We're just giving them the ability to offer varying levels of training for those three categories.
yes, sir. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 45th for a question.
Mr. Chairman, would you please yield?
I yield for the gentlelady from the 45th.
Thank you. Is it not true over the last several years that we have refined our regulatory process of those foster parents and done a much better job, and also in recruitment?
That is exactly right, and I think this bill is going to help bolster those efforts.
One further question.
I yield.
Is it not true that we have offered in the last few years a much better support infrastructure supporting these parents, and also children that come into the system when they come from a high-risk area or they have advanced trauma, that we also offer more support for those particular foster and respite care parents? Is that not true?
Yes, that's exactly right. And there's a lot of nonprofits and for-profit groups out there as well, that are operating outside of the department, that are really helping supplement, our efforts there. And and it's a team effort. This has to be a team effort. It can't start and stop with government. It's got to be every citizen in this state needs to do a better job of taking care of these 12,000 plus children that have lost their homes.
You have no more questions.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Is it-
I encourage everyone to support this great bill. Thank you.
Does any other senator wish to speak for or against the measure? Chair sees none. The question is on the adoption of, so we've got an amendment here, and we're going to first take up the amendment. Amendment number 1. Is there objection to adopting amendment number 1? The chair hears none, and amendment number 1 is adopted. The question is now on the adoption of the committee substitute as amended. Is there objection to adoption of the committee substitute as amended? The chair hears none, and the committee substitute is amended as adopted. Is there objection to agreeing to the report of the committee which is favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Is there objection to the main question being ordered? The chair hears none, and the main question is ordered. Questions now on the passage of the bill by substitute. All those in favor of the bill will vote yea. Opposed, nay. The secretary will unlock the machine. On the passage of the bill, the yeas are 53, the nays are 1. And this bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed by substitute. I want to applaud the senator from the 28th for his good work on this measure. Thank you, sir. Ms. Secretary, can you please read the caption of Senate Bill 345?
Senate Bill 345 by Senator Kirkpatrick of the 32nd and others. A bill to be titled an act to amend Chapter 2 of Title 26 of the Official Code of Georgia annotated relating to standards, labeling, and adulteration of food so as to provide for nonprofit organizations to prepare and provide food in accordance with the Department of Health requirements and for other purposes. Mr. President, on February 5th, 2020, the Senate Committee on Health and Human Services recommends that this bill do pass by substitute, respectfully submitted by Senator Watson, Chair. Mr. President, the Committee on Health and Human Services offers the following substitute to Senate Bill 345, a bill to be titled an act to amend Chapter 2 of Title 26 of the Official Code of Georgia annotated relating to standards, labeling, and adulteration of food so as to provide for nonprofit organizations to prepare and provide food in accordance with the Department of Public Health requirements and for other purposes. That completes order, Mr. President.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 32nd to speak to Senate Bill 345.
Thank you, Mr. President. Fellow senators, I bring you Senate Bill 345, the SOS, Save Our Sandwiches bill. Last spring, a large nonprofit that serves 7 counties in Georgia, Must Ministries, had an issue arise during a routine county health inspection that resulted in their summer sandwich program being shut down. The program had been operating for 24 years, feeding thousands of hungry kids during the summer and school breaks when many of them did not have access to food. The program had not had any issues during that time, but our current food safety laws did not technically allow them to operate the program. This resulted in the charity having to raise an unbudgeted $250,000 to buy the sandwiches last summer. Over the last 9 months, I've been working closely with Governor Kemp's office, as well as the Department of Public Health and the Georgia Department of Agriculture, since both of them have jurisdiction over food safety in Georgia. Governor Roy Barnes, a member of the Must Board, has also helped in this effort. This bipartisan bill, crafted with input from DPH and Georgia Department of Agriculture, strikes a balance between public safety and the needs of hungry kids in our community, and allows nonprofits that follow basic food safety procedures that are already in law to operate these summer feeding programs in a safe manner. The Health and Human Services Committee heard an exhaustive line-by-line review of the bill, which I'm happy to go through with you if requested, and pass the bill unanimously. The meat of the bill, no pun intended, is in lines 127 to 132 and 146 to 147. The bill basically allows nonprofits to operate this program for a 12-week period during the summer and an additional 4 weeks during the year, and to deliver sandwiches to locations like apartment complexes and trailer parks. It allows the sandwiches to be prepared in church kitchens, provided basic food safety measures such as proper hand washing, gloves, etc. are followed. I would urge your support for this bill that is important to so many disadvantaged kids and the volunteers that are trying to help them. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 37th for a question.
Senator, is it not true that we've all heard the saying that there's no such thing as a free lunch?
Yes, Senator, that's absolutely true.
Is it not true that this is one free lunch program that ought to be approved? I urge the Senate to vote for it.
If we pass this bill, then these would be a free lunch. If we don't, there's no free lunch. Thank you for the question.
You have no more questions.
Thank you. I yield the well and ask for your favorable consideration.
Does any other senator wish to speak for or against the measure? Chair hears none. Questions on the adoption of the committee substitute. Is there objection to the adoption of the committee substitute? Chair hears none, and the committee substitute is adopted. Is there objection to agreeing to the report of the committee which is favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none, and the report of the committee is agreed to. Is there objection to the main question being ordered? Chair hears none, and the main question is ordered. The question is now on the passage of the bill by substitute. All those in favor of the bill vote yea. Opposed, nay. The secretary will unlock the machine. All right, on the passage of the bill, the yeas are 53, the nays are 0. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed by substitute. Thank you, Senator. Mr. Secretary, can you please read the caption of Senate Bill 356?
Senate Bill number 356 by Senator Ligon of the 3rd, a bill to be titled an act to amend Part 1 of Article 2 of Chapter 8 of Title 12 of the Fishery Code of Georgia annotated, relating to general provisions regarding solid waste management, so as to allow the expansion of certain municipal solid waste landfills to areas within 2 miles of military airspace used as bombing ranges and for other purposes. Mr. President, on February 11, 2020, the Senate Committee on Natural Resources and the Environment recommends that this bill do pass. Respectfully submitted by Senator Harper, Chair. That completes order, Mr. President.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 3rd to speak to Senate Bill 356.
Thank you, Mr. President. This bill will help McIntosh County with their landfill. In 1997, legislation was passed to keep a large commercial landfill out of Long County. This was done by prohibiting any landfills to be placed within 2 miles of the Townsend bombing range that's used by the military to practice dropping the bombs. At that time, McIntosh County had their landfill, which was operating close to that area. Some of their land property is on the other side, but because of this law, they're unable to expand their landfill, and they need to do this. If we don't pass this law, then it's going to cost them millions of dollars to buy more property and to develop that landfill. And frankly, McIntosh County does not have the funds to do that. It is one of our more needier, poorer counties. And so I would just urge you to pass the bill. All it will do is essentially grandfather the McIntosh County landfill into that prior law so that they can expand what they're currently doing at their landfill. I'll be glad to yield for any questions.
The chair recognizes the minority leader for a question.
Senator Yield?
Yes.
Yes. Is it not true that this landfill was one of the last ones, or maybe even the last one that wasn't lined, but this addition is going to be lined and actually that will be safer and better for the environment than presently exists?
Exactly. It will fall under the new regulations and it will be lined, and we need to pass the bill. So.
Do you further yield?
Yes, I'll
Chair recognizes the senator from the 47th for a question.
Would my good colleague go on the record as being a pro-landfill guy now?
Sometimes I am, and sometimes I'm not, Senator. I have a balanced portfolio in that regard. So. I yield the well, Mr.
You
President.
had no more questions. I was photobombing somebody over here. Does any other senator wish to speak for or against the bill? Chair sees none. Is there objection to agreeing to the report of the committee which is favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none, and the report of the committee is agreed to. Is there objection to the main question being ordered? The chair hears none. The main question is ordered. The questions on the passage of the bill. All those in favor of the bill will vote yea. Opposed, nay. The secretary will unlock the machine. On the passage of the bill, the yeas are 51, the nays are 0. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed. For what purpose does the senator from the 29th rise?
Mr. President, I move that the Senate agree to House Substitute Bill 149 as amended by the Senate.
Will the secretary read the caption of Senate Bill 149?
Senate Bill number 149 by Senator Robertson of the 29th and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Article 1 of Chapter 2 of Title 40 of the Fiscal Code of Georgia annotated relating to registration and licensing of motor vehicles generally so as to permit the owner or operator of a vehicle which has a valid number license plate without the required revalidation decal affixed to the plate to retain custody of the vehicle and for other purposes. Mr. President, the House offers the following substitute to Senate Bill 149, a bill to be titled an act to amend Title 40 of Fiscal Code of Georgia annotated relating to motor vehicles and traffic so as to provide for definitions relative to registration and licensing of motor vehicles, to provide for certain exceptions of the issuance of license plates, application for motor vehicle registration, and the design and display of license plates and revalidation decals, and for other purposes. Mr. President, Senator Robertson of the 29th offers the following amendment number 1 to amend House substitute to Senate Bill 149 by deleting October 1st, 2020 on line 315 and inserting in lieu thereof April 1st, 2021, and by deleting July 1st, 2019 on line 316 and inserting in lieu thereof July 1st, 2020. That completes the order, Mr. President.
The senator from the 29th has moved that the Senate agree to House substitute to Senate Bill 149 as amended. Chair would like to recognize the senator to speak to his motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. Fellow senators, I rise today in support of the legislation in front of you. You should have a copy and a copy of the amendment on your desk. What this legislation does, you've already passed a portion of it unanimously, and what it deals with, giving the motorists who are stopped by law enforcement for no state tag, it gives them the opportunity to retain the vehicle until their court date so that their vehicles are not towed. After the bill passed here, it went over to the House. Over in the House, it became what we know as a Christmas tree. So, Merry Christmas. What I agree on here is another addition added, deals with, in Section 5, deals with digital license plates being used here in the state of Georgia. This has been discussed with the Department of Revenue. It has no impact on revenue. There's no funding for it. What it would start out of at best is a pilot program here in the state. And after reading through the language, I feel very comfortable with the language there dealing with the digital license plate. Much more research has to be done, but it does give us the opportunity to explore that alternative to the current license plates we have. If you look on line 289, dealing with a Class M driver's license, there's clarification there where it says motorcycles, motor-driven cycles, and three-wheeled motorcycles not equipped with seat belts and a frame to partially or fully enclose the operator. This corrects or actually updates the code to deal with a lot of the three-wheeled motor vehicles that currently are up on the highways in other parts. And then finally, if you'll look at Section 13, line 302, what this deals with is currently the Georgia distracted driving law has confused some as to what they can have in their vehicle, and many have installed certain holders and handles in order to put their cell phones and other GPS devices in so as to free their hands as they're traveling. And they ask for some legislation in order to legalize this practice and to clear up any confusion between law enforcement as opposed to having products installed in the vehicle that could distract the driver as they're driving or prevent the driver from having clear view of the road ahead. The amendment that you see there, all it is doing is, since the legislation did carry over from last session, in this way it'll get it updated and push the times out at a decent amount of time so that these changes can be implemented. And with that, Mr. President, I'm prepared to answer any questions.
You did such a, Chair recognizes the senator from the 20th. I almost said you did such a good job you didn't have any questions, but.
Thank you, Mr. President. Will the senator yield?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman.
I haven't studied this ahead of time, so just trying to understand it. Explain the digital license plate to me, how that might work and
What the digital
what
license
that
plate.
really is.
Yes, sir. What it is there's a advocacy group, and they're promoting these types of license plates have been used in other states, Arizona, Texas, and out on the West Coast. And the purpose of it would give a state agency the ability, if an individual's license plate expired, with the technology that's been developed, it would give them the ability to turn the license plate off. Therefore, allowing law enforcement and public safety to understand that vehicle was not a licensed vehicle, a current licensed vehicle. Also, in examples of amber alerts, flash flood warnings, and things like this could also be displayed. So the technology is, I say it's new, it's probably been around for about 10 years. And what they've agreed to do is to start a pilot program here in Georgia, just to see if it's something that would be applicable to our state. And talking to the Department of Revenue, they feel comfortable with the pilot program starting, and with certain vehicles in that pilot program being equipped with a digital license plate, just to see how the system works.
Well, not to do you further yield?
Yes, sir, I do.
Not to belabor this too much, but I mean, what would it actually look like? Is it?
It would look exactly like a Georgia license plate. It'd be just slightly thicker. But let's say if you had a personal tag that has probably the most well-known mascot in the United States of America on it, you would be able to get that exact same license plate, but it would be in digital format instead of a hard format.
Okay. And then, do you further yield?
Yes, sir, I do.
The part about the three-wheeled vehicles, or what is that trying to do? Does that mean they don't have to have a seatbelt, or they are going to have a seatbelt, or?
They already do not, and there was some confusion in there as to whether they were to be classified as a motorcycle or as a vehicle, and so it clears up that confusion. Basically, what these apply to are three-wheeled motorcycles.
So they'd be treated like a two-wheeled
They would be treated
motorcycle.
like the typical two-wheeled motorcycle.
Right.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Senator. Appreciate
Thank you.
it.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 47th for a question.
Thank you, Mr. President. Would the Senator yield?
Yes, sir, I do.
So I was curious when we're talking about the seat belts.
Yes, sir.
It doesn't say whether it's a factory installed seat belt or whether it's, if somebody just goes in there and cuts the seat belt out, can you address that? What happens if somebody just removes a seat belt?
If somebody removes a factory-installed seatbelt on a vehicle that is not required in the state of Georgia to have a seatbelt, then that's absolutely the owner of that vehicle's option. But if it's a vehicle such as a passenger car that has seatbelts installed and somebody goes in and removes the seatbelt, then of course they would be subject to seatbelt legislation here in Georgia.
Would you further yield?
Yes, sir.
This was a follow-up on the three-wheeled vehicle on line 271, 272. So what I'm really after is if somebody, it doesn't say factory installed or manufactured or anything along those lines.
Right. Some of those three wheels are kits, and so when people build the bikes, the problem was to clear up for public safety what is a motorcycle and what is a vehicle. And some of the three-wheeled vehicles, officers were making a determination that they should have been held to the same standard as a passenger vehicle, when in fact they should be held to the same standard as a motorcycle.
Do you continue to yield?
Yes, sir. No, sir. I was looking at.
Yes or no?
No, sir.
Gentleman has left the well. The chair recognizes the senator from the 6th to speak to the measure.
Thank you, Mr. President. With respect to this legislation, we voted unanimously for the senator's legislation initially, well, except for one senator. I have real issues with respect to the substitute that's come back, and specifically in terms of the digital license plates. So in terms of the explanation of it, it is that if, for example, all of a sudden your tag expires, we can just turn it off, right? Well, what that says to me then is that the government can track your vehicle wherever you are with respect to a digital license plate. And I think it's one of those things that this really needs to be looked at, specifically with respect to privacy issues and government overreach, over-policing, in terms of profiling, targeting certain communities. And with respect to what the original bill is and what we have now, it's totally different. And also in terms of, I have concerns specifically about constitutionality issues with respect to the two subject matter rule. When we're talking about license plates and then all of a sudden we're starting to reclassify certain things in types of licenses. Obviously, those are two different things, and so we all need to be incredibly concerned not only with the actual subject matter of the bill now, but also whether or not it even is constitutional. Thank you.
Chair Senator has left the well. Does any other senator wish to speak for or against the motion? Chair sees none. Is there objection to the main question being ordered? Chair hears none, and the main question is ordered. The question is on agreeing to the House substitute to Senate Bill 149 as amended. All those in favor of the motion will vote yea. Opposed, nay. The Secretary will unlock the machine. On the motion to agree to the House substitute to Senate Bill 149 as amended, the yeas are 24, the nays are 29, and the motion has failed. Chair recognizes the majority leader. Oh, one moment. Mr. Secretary, can you please read a joint resolution that has been brought to us?
House Resolution 1170 by Representative Burns of the 159th and others. A resolution calling a joint session of the House of Representatives and the Senate for the purpose of hearing a message from the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, inviting each other Justice of the Supreme Court and each Judge of the Court of Appeals to be present at the joint session and for other purposes. Just right there. Be resolved by the General Assembly of Georgia that the Honorable Chief Justice of the Supreme Court is hereby invited to address a joint session of the House of Representatives and the Senate at 11 a.m. Wednesday, February 26, 2020, in the Hall of the House of Representatives. Be it further resolved that a joint session of the House of Representatives and the Senate shall be in the Hall of the House of Representatives at 10:45 a.m. on the aforesaid date for the purpose of hearing an address from the Chief Justice. That completes the order, Mr. President.
Is there objection to adoption of the resolution? The chair hears none, and the resolution is adopted. Now, I'd like to recognize our majority leader.
Mr. President, I move that the Senate stand adjourned until 10 o'clock on 21 February 2020.
Mr. Secretary, can you please read the announcements?
Rules will meet upon adjournment in 4:50 cap. Government oversight will meet in 125 cap at 1 p.m. Higher education will meet in 450 cap at 1 p.m. Finance will meet in MES 1 at 2 p.m. Insurance and Labor will meet in 310 CLOB at 2 p.m. Regulated Industries and Utilities will meet in 450 CAP at 3 p.m. Science and Technology will meet in MES 1 at 3 p.m. Judiciary will meet in 307 CLOB at 4 p.m. And Transportation will meet in 310 CLOB at 4 p.m. That completes the order, Mr. President.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 36th for an announcement.
Thank you. Briefly, colleagues, come and enjoy a hot lunch in LOB 507 with Working Families Caucus. We will be hearing from Chairman Jack Hill and Chairman Terry England on the two budgets that we are engaging with, 2020 and 2021. So hope you'll join us for that illuminating discussion with our chairs of appropriations.
If I could get everyone's attention, I'd like to recognize the senator from the 4th for an announcement.
Thank you, Mr. President. Ladies and gentlemen, the Senate, on your desk is a schedule of subcommittee meetings of the Appropriations Committee that already started this morning. We sent you an email listing yesterday afternoon. Just want you to know you're welcome to attend these subcommittee meetings, to participate and to listen and learn more about the budget process. So the schedule is there. Some of them are early in the morning, but we're trying to not conflict with standing committees and not conflict with our session, and yet get our work done. Let's get this budget going so we can start to aim at getting out on a good date, not too late this year. So thank you so much for your cooperation.
Thank you, Senator. The Majority Leader has moved that the Senate stand adjourned until Friday, February 21st, 2020 at 10 a.m. All those in favor of the motion will signify by saying aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes clearly have it, and the Senate stands adjourned. Thank you.